Well, let me begin by thanking you all for joining us this morning. It is important at the beginning to acknowledge that last week saw a series of tragic circumstances occur in our city, Indianapolis. Those events resulted in the deaths of 3 of our citizens and understandable community concern that spilled into our streets. Today, I plan to directly address a number of those concerns as it relates to our ongoing efforts to examine and to improve police accountability and transparency, and particularly around the use of force. But I want to also acknowledge at the front end that we will not be able to offer answers to any outstanding questions that remain as it relates to last week's incidents. While I am sure that this will be frustrating to many, these investigations are now in the hands of the Marion County prosecutor and a soon-to-be-named special prosecutor, with monitoring from federal authorities. And we have been advised that the release of any information should only occur at the direction of those individuals. Indianapolis has my commitment that we will continue to provide information as soon as it is releasable. And to those in our community who have expressed real concerns, I am listening and learning from you. And I see the frustration and the heartbreak that our city endures as we respond to these tragedies. I share that heartbreak. I know that Chief Randy Taylor shares that heartbreak. Nothing that I might say, only what I will do will have any impact on the way residents view law enforcement in the city of Indianapolis. That is partly why last week I appealed to federal authorities and directly to the United States Attorney's Office to monitor the investigation into last week's fatal police shootings. But this conversation is not new. Our commitment to addressing the systemic challenges and the history of mistrust is what led us to implement department-wide implicit bias training in 2018. It was what led to the creation of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, located within IMPD's training academy. And it is why we have invested millions of dollars in technology upgrades for the police department over the past 4 years. But I am aware that there's one form of technology that Indianapolis has clamored for across multiple mayoral administrations and more than a handful of police chiefs. The citywide deployment of body-worn cameras for our IMPD officers. For more than a decade, our city has wanted to bring this now common resource into our police department. And that is why I was proud when we partnered with the City County Council to launch a body camera pilot program that included community engagement and public surveys. And I was even more proud that upon completion of that pilot stage last summer, the City County Council approved our request for $1.2 million in the 2020 city operating budget to permanently implement body cameras beginning this year. This represented the first time in our city's history that IMPD has been provided the resources to make body cameras a reality. Since then, the Office of Finance and Management and IMPD have been very busy. We have identified a vendor that is prepared to begin deploying this technology throughout IMPD's districts by midsummer, with full deployment achieved over the coming months. Putting the bureaucracy aside for a moment, let me simplify years of work in a simple statement to the community. Our police force deserves body-worn cameras. Our community deserves body-worn cameras. And after years of waiting, I am committing that this summer we will have body-worn cameras. Additionally, I want to address another ongoing initiative that is nearly reaching fruition and speaks to community concerns that have been raised in the recent days. After more than a year of work to examine national best practices and our internal operations, IMPD is now set to staff and implement a new police use of force review board that will include civilian participation. In the matters that rise before it, this board will look at not just firearms cases, but other types of cases as well, such as physical altercations or the use of a taser. The review board will include appointed civilian representatives as part of its operations, a departure from past practice in which such matters were reviewed exclusively by IMPD officers themselves. Most critically, this deployment will be fast. I have asked Chief Taylor to submit this proposal to the General Orders Committee within the next 15 days. As to what policy that board will oversee, IMPD's Policy and Planning Division has been working over the last 2 years with legal experts to craft an updated use of force policy that incorporates national best practices as well as local legal framework. As part of this process, visual documents for learning have been created and incorporated directly into the policy, and an updated training curriculum will be deployed at the IMPD Training Academy. A final legal review is currently being conducted with outside legal experts, and IMPD expects to put the new policy in front of the General Orders Committee in the next 30 days. Our police do a dangerous job. Tragically, as we saw a month ago, it can be a deadly job, but it is essential. And our commitment to accountability and transparency will, I am convinced, protect good policing as much as it uncovers any abuses should they ever occur. Every member of our community should feel that they can depend on our police to protect and serve residents equally under the law. And to the extent they do not, it is our obligation to identify where those credibility gaps exist and how we can address them. Over the last 2 years, we have worked toward 3 of those gaps: the lack of body-worn cameras, a transparent use of force review process with community participation, and an updated policy for when our officers use force. I'm proud of the progress that we've made, but recognize that recent events may reveal new gaps that require self-reflection and then decisive action. It is my hope that our continued commitment to building bridges of trust with the community through our actions and our policies, and that such provide a measure of assurance for every member of our community. So with more information about the implementation of these programs, I'd like to now turn it over to the Chief of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, Chief Randy Taylor. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. For the last 3 years, IMPD has been working to implement the kinds of policies and programs that build trust with the community and to strengthen our partnerships with our neighbors, for we all want a community that is safe and thriving. But policy developments take time. Thorough legal reviews take time, and the types of changes that we're talking about will take time, and we need to get them right. As Mayor Hogsett said, the Use of Force Review Board will have authority to review uses of force by IMPD officers, whether a physical altercation, a deployment of a taser, or the use of a firearm. The board will be made up of merit rank officers as well as civilian members appointed by the Chief of Police, including one nominated by the Mayor of Indianapolis, one nominated by the President of the City County Council, and one nominated by the members of the department. Civilian members will have specific training prerequisites as well as ongoing training mandates. Similar to the board it replaces, the Firearms Review Board, the Use of Force Review Board will not have the authority to recommend discipline, but will instead focus on whether an officer's actions were within department policy. Chief of Police will have final authority to recommend discipline, subject to the oversight of the Civilian Police Merit Board. Now, to body-worn cameras. There's been much discussion around body-worn cameras for our department, stretching back 6 years. I understand that the community is frustrated that this technology has not yet been deployed. In 2014, after our first pilot program was rolled out, prohibitive costs, lack of community buy-in, and outdated city technology infrastructure were cited as the reasons. That's why, over the past 5 years, we've made millions of dollars in investments to our technology infrastructure. Why we initiated a second pilot test program and one that implemented was stakeholder driven. I can assure you that we remain on track to begin rolling out our program on our department in Q3 of this year between July and September. As a result of this pilot, IMPD has selected Utility as our preferred vendor for technology for 2 main reasons. First, because each IMPD officer has their own vehicle, officers do not have to return to their district before going home at the end of each shift. For that reason, decentralization uploading of body camera footage is important for our department. Utility has the best available technology with this capability. Secondly, Utility has a variety of automatic recording triggers or devices that help to turn an officer's body-worn camera on so that in stressful and potentially life-threatening situations, the onus is not entirely on the officer to remember to hit record. We continue to work with researchers to develop a policy for this program that best serves both Indianapolis residents and our officers. I would like to end by saying that I know that emotions are running high in our city right now. Residents and officers alike have been impacted by the events of last week and in the last few months. And I understand the frustrations of many. I understand that there's distrust with some. But my 30-plus years of law enforcement and my time here in the city of Indianapolis have learned that Indianapolis is strongest when it stands together. As Mayor Hogsett would say, we are one city. And while recent weeks have been challenging for all of us, it's my sincere hope that we can all come together and make our city a safer place for every single resident. Now I'd like to introduce the President of the City County Council, Joe Hogsett.
Good morning, and thank you, Mayor Hogsett and Chief Taylor, for your leadership and for the invitation to be with you today. As Mayor Hogsett noted, the events of last week were wrenching. The grief our city feels is plainly evident in our streets and in our homes and in the halls of our city government. It has been as plain in my communication with my neighbors as it has been in conversations with my fellow councilors, who are as deeply saddened today as they were even a month ago when we mourned the loss of Officer Breanne Leith. And it's been plain in my many conversations with Chief Taylor over the last week, during which he has repeatedly committed to truth and transparency in these investigations, and in discussions with our mayor, during which he has repeatedly committed to continuing reforms and community input. And it's with me this morning, as it is with so many parents, as I look at my own children, a 20-year-old Black man and an adolescent girl. And I know that Deshaun Reed and Mikhail Cole's parents, to them, they were equally precious. And the pain that their loved ones are feeling now stabs at my heart and at the hearts of every member of our council. Likewise, the pain felt by the families of Roderick Payne and Nia Cope, whose lives were taken by stray bullets, rips at the heart of this community. Members of our council have been at the protests, offering their support and a listening ear. And some have been behind the scenes pushing for answers, but all are profoundly concerned about these events and their impact on this community, particularly the Black community. The last time our city experienced this type of grief was 2 years ago this month, and in reaction, members of the council immediately announced a community conversation series to hear directly from citizens their perspectives on what needed to happen to improve law enforcement community relations. Over and over again, the community requested implicit bias training and body cameras for law enforcement. And 18 months later, the council had appropriated funding for both. Implicit bias training was implemented for every member of IMPD. And today we announce the implementation of body cameras for the department. In addition, community members called for IMPD's general orders to be posted online. IMPD has acted, and you can now find those orders at the indy.gov website. In addition, I want to recognize Chief Taylor for his diligence in following community protocols for transparency. These changes flow from our ongoing dialogue with our community. I mention these facts to assure our community that your voices do matter and that we are listening. And yes, the wheels of government sometimes move more slowly than we wish that they did. And yes, it's been a long time coming, but change has come and will continue to come. And the voices in our community are helping to drive that change. As Mayor Hogsett said, there is more work left to do. We continue to need the input of our whole community. The measures I just referenced are the beginning of the changes we hope to see in Indianapolis, not the end. We're committed to a full vetting of the facts, including the trauma and pain the community has experienced. I need your input. We need your input, energy, prayers, and patience as we work together to make Indianapolis a place where we all feel safe, welcome, and valued. That is the city we all deserve, and it will come. Thank you.
Now open it up for Q&A. As a reminder, if you enter your name and outlet into the chat box, we will unmute you and you will be able to ask your question of the panel. Eric Berman, WIBC.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Mayor, thanks for doing this morning. I have a question for you and possibly for Councilor Osili as well. As Councilor Osili mentioned, this started with after the Aaron Bailey shooting a couple of years ago. Why did it take 18 months to get to funding for body cameras? And how quickly, you mentioned sometime this summer you're committed to getting those out. How quickly do you anticipate that can be carried out?
Well, let me just begin by saying there is an enormous amount of legal processes and, frankly, an examination of national best practices that has occurred over the last 18 months. As the chief mentioned, we had a pilot program in 2014. We implemented yet again another pilot program to prepare and a pilot program that included community outreach, community participation, and stakeholder involvement. So there has been a lot of work being done beyond, and I'll let the president speak to this, beyond just seeking an appropriation to be included in a budget because body cameras are not an inexpensive item. So there has been diligence toward working to today's announcement. And I'll let the chief speak to the timetable in terms of where we go from here. But I believe that we should have body cameras available, Chief, and correct me if I'm wrong, for most all, if not all of our officers by the third quarter of this year.
That's correct, sir.
And if I may, Mayor and Eric, as the mayor just mentioned right now, there has been an examination of best practices. Please understand that in that 18 months, a pilot program had already been implemented. So a lot of work has been done, but do understand that when we're working and when IMPD and the administration are working to determine what the best product could be, and as you heard the chief and the selection, the reasons for the selection, that does take time. And if we had jumped straight to the first vendor, I think that we would all regret. But I do think that we have selected the very best one available for our force here, and all of that has taken our time over the course of the last 18 months.
Megan Santorum, WRTV.
Hey, good morning. I know that body cameras have been in the works for quite some time now, but was the process sped up and this new summer implementation in response to events last week?
Well, I'll let the chief respond to that directly. I can assure you that we have been, again, diligently working for the last 18 months to get to today's announcement. I don't think it is fair to say that today's announcement was necessarily driven by the events last week. What the events last week underscore, though, is a tragic set of circumstances that affect our entire community. And we want to make the announcement as soon as we can because the community, understandably, wants the assurance that the city and IMPD are doing everything we can to provide our officers the best equipment, the best technology that protects them and protects the community as a whole. Chief?
Yes, sir. I would agree with your sentiments exactly. It's been a little bit of a long process, but the good thing is I think we're coming to the point where we will be able to implement those sometime between July and September. We think the product is good, but this has been a process that exceeded the time frame involving this latest group of shootings. But we're happy to get it implemented here as soon as possible.
And
just add,
go ahead.
we were also, over the last 18 months, in the process of implementing a brand new computer-aided dispatch and record management system through Motorola and upgrading the technology so that we're at this point now where we possibly through or with this vendor have some CAD integration that helps take the activation of the camera out of the hands of the officer and puts it into policy as part of the computer-aided dispatch and based on the type of runs that our officers are dispatched to. So trying to cram a bunch of new technology in at the same time really sets you on a path of disaster if you don't do it the correct way. So that was another reason why there was a delay in there. We were going through a lot of technology upgrades that I think is only going to enhance our ability to use body cameras effectively.
Thank you all for joining us today. A press release will be going out following this event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.